Good day, everybody. Welcome to session 3 of our training videos. And this one's hopefully going to be a big mind opener for a lot of people. One of my biggest weaknesses when I was trading is not realizing when to turn systems on or off, or when just not to trade, or not to trade the way I trade. And the reason why I say that is oftentimes you'll go and have a nice little run, make a lot of wins, and you're accountably building, you'll build confidence, and then all of a sudden you just get wrecked. And you go back to square one. Because unfortunately, when you lose, you'll lose harder if you're not in the right mindset than when you're winning, because you're going to end up going on tilt and gambling it all away. So, looking very forward to this one.
Yeah,
And the big idea here is you're going to find out that every day can fit into one of 4 categories, which is super, super powerful to be able to minimize what's happening on the chart and have a better understanding as the day progresses of where you are on the chart. So, Mickey, before I give it all away,
yeah,
you're up.
yeah, man. And that happens to a lot of people is like they don't realize that just between 9:30 and 16:15, there's over 2,500 possible outcomes that could happen, right? And the human brain can't facilitate that all, right? So one thing that we did to tie in like the O5 boxes that tie into the hourly boxes that tie into the 3-hour structure, it all ties into the daily classification. And there's 4 possible outcomes that 9:30 to 16:15 can do, right? And that ties in with the live price component, right? So one thing, first and foremost, what you need to do is you need to go to the indicators that you are assigned, and you need to go to the range DMP DWP homework. Now, this is just for the homework back test that should be conducting, right? You're going to be using the higher time frame, lower time frame boxes for live trading, right? And one of the fourth these 4 environments represent the 4 types of markets that you can see, right? We know that there's markets that range, those markets that mean revert, those markets that, trend, right? And so, like, that's what these are going to represent. So, like, the importance of knowing these 4 is knowing what type of trader you should be, right? So, you're not going to try to trend trade when you're in a range and market. And when you're in a reversal market, you're not going to try to range trade, right? And when you're in a ranging market, you're going to be trying to, identify the range, and you're going to try to, shoot for low hanging fruit. But in a trending market, you'd be trying to extend that expected value and capture the MFE of the move, right? So understanding the market environment from an intraday perspective is huge, and not too many people ever even talk about that, right? They just say, yes, this is high resistance, or this is a range, or this is trending, or this is the face ripper day. But they don't really take the scientific approach to back up how to identify it. And that's what we kind of do in this last video for the live price phase, right? So let's start, right? So a range day of range 1 is where we test. So we're going to be using for each one of these, we're going to be using the hourly boxes, right? And the 9:30 1-minute candle highlighted. So this green box right here is, if we went to the 1-minute chart, right, and highlighted the 9:30 candle, you would see that the whole thing is lit up, right? And instead of using, and we're going to consider this 9:30 our mean, right? We're going to think this is going to be the average every single day. Why? Because it's a fixed constant that happens the same place, same time, every single day. And we're going to take our measurements around that, right? And then we're going to use the hourly boxes, which are these blue boxes, right? Okay, so now let's get into what each of the 4 type of market environments and conditions are, right? So a range 1, right, is defined by pushing away from the 9:30 and, coming back to it, right? And we swipe through it, we touch it, we make out with it, is something I always refer to, for 4 more hours of that RTH day, right? So if we look, right, this is a representation of a range 1. You have the 9 o'clock hour, that's hour 1. You have the 10 o'clock hour, that's hour 2. That is touching or swiping through this green box, which is known as the 9:30. You have the 11 o'clock hour, that's hour 3. You have the 12 o'clock hour, that's hour 4. and then so forth and so forth for the rest of the day, you make out with the 930 price. Now, in this environment, it doesn't make sense to try to get a long-term trend play, right? So we know that as a trader, we want to condition our mindset, to take low-hanging fruit, to, if we're moving away from the 930, to use some kind of entry criteria to get it back to the 930, right? And vice versa, to the upside, back to the downside, right? And so the cool thing about this is that, like, even though the probabilities of you being successful for longer moves is less, you can still be profitable, if not more profitable, on these kind of solid days, trading 10 handles there and 10 handles there. Because as soon as you identify the range, like, you understand where the low value is and where the high value is, right? And so, like, if we come to our data, right, and we look at the last 4,180 days, we can see that R1, which represents a range 1, happens 38% of the time, right? So that means we range intraday more than we trend, based off of the rule set that I just explained to you, right? So now we know what a range 1 is, right? We know how to trade it. We know how to manage it, right? So, like, we know, like, if we're buying down here or buying down here, we can have a larger stop, right? And we can shoot for low-hanging fruit, like the previous hour 50% or the previous hour high or the 930 itself, right? Or we can take 05 breakouts with 10 handles. You can do all that, right? So now, right, I want to bring the attention up to why we use remember in the last class we talked about the 2 3-hour sections of time that we talked about, like, that we use. We use the 9, the 10, the 11, reset, the 12, the 1, and the 2. And we use this mostly for the data, to be able to put statistics behind these sections of the day. However, right, what you realize is they really help a lot when it comes to classifying the days, right? So when you're doing the daily classification, it makes it easier, right? At 12, you have a pretty good idea, based off the 9, 10, 11 3-hour, that you should be trading a range in market between 12, 1, and 2, right? So let's move on to the next stall. Right, so the next stall, which is actually the second highest probability, right, is known as a directional width pullback, right? So it happens when we move away from the 930, right, this green box, and we never come back, right? So you see 9, 10, 11 to the upside stacking, and then 12, 1, 2. The thing that makes it a directional width pullback is the fact that one of the hours started heading back to the 930 and took out an hourly low, right? So this 1400 hour is the hour that started heading back to the 930, took out this hour's low, but could never make it back to the 930, right? Key indications that it's going to be a DWP, right, or a DMP once we get to it, is the fact that 9:45 to 10:15 stay away from the 930 price. However, that's not a must, but that's an early indication that you're in a DWP or a DMP style day. Right now, on these days, we know that we're better off buying the dip and not selling the rip. Right, so on every pullback, like right here, we should be buying the dip. On here, we should be buying the dip because it's opening a new hour at the 50%. We should buy the dip because we have a place to put risk at, right? And then you can see 9, 10, 11 stacked on top of each other, and then 12, 1, 2 did a reverse signature within the hours. But then it was only because most DWPs end in a range, right? A tight range, right? All right, so that's DWP, and we can see with the DWP, when we move away from the 930, and then we start coming back and we take out an hourly low, and it would be the same if we moved away to the downside, we'd be moving away from the 930 to the downside, and then one of the hours would be taking out the high of a previous hour, and then we would never make it back to the 930, right? And we can see from a data approach, right, out of 4,180 days, this comes in second place, right? It happens 32% of the time. And we can see when the DWP time, and this will change based off of Asia, London, and the stuff we get into in the next phase, we can actually put data on which hour is going to wipe out that low or that high for a DWP, a directional with pullback. Okay. So now we know what style trader to be in those kind of days, what models we should turn on in those style days. And so now let's talk about what a range 2 is, right? A range 2 is where we move away from the 930, so 9, 10, 11, right? But then we revert back between 11 and 16, 15, right? So we revert all the way back. So this area right here, let's see if I can get my paint tool to work, right? You can see right here, right? We put a gap, and I call this the thigh gap, right? But between 11 and 13 or 16, 15, we come back. So this would be like, it can either be the 12 o'clock that reverse back, or the 1 o'clock, or even the 2 o'clock, or it can be the 11 o'clock. So the 11 o'clock can put a Q1 high in that hour, stacking the 9, 10, 11, and then reverse back and be having a gap between the 930 and where price is, right? But the key component to this is we revert all the way back to the 930 in that second 3-hour period. So as you can see here, and this is another reason why I like these 3 hours the way I do, is 9, 10, 11. So 11 stacking on 10 and 10 stacking on 9. And in the next phase of this, we're going to show you how to put statistical data behind this structure. And then we reset our brain in 12, 1, 2, right? Which makes it range 2, right? And we can see with data that a range 2 happens the least amount of times, right? So we revert back to the 930. Now, there's a couple of reasons because of this, right? Because most range 2s, right, don't go this is a proper range 2, right? But I'm going to show you. Let me stop drawing all over the place. This right here could be considered a range 2 because you can see in the 11 o'clock hour, we start going in that gap. But this doesn't count because you have 9, 10. Well, I guess this would count as a range 2, right? So this would be another example of a range 2 that's more tighter and rangier. But majority of the time when you see these types of range 2, it's actually a range 1, because it'll be like 9 o'clock touching the 930, 10 o'clock touching the 930, and then the 11th o'clock hour would have touched the 930, and then we would have moved away and then came back in the afternoon touching it. Well, that would have been considered a range 1. So when in doubt, range 1 it out, right? Like count it as a range 1 or trade it as a range 1. Okay, so now let's talk about the final one, right? Which we have to find it. Oh, here we go. This is right here. So the final one is a directional with no pullback. So it's very similar to, it's very similar to the directional with pullback, right? Except for we don't take out an hourly low, right? So 9 o'clock, we move away from it, and then 10 o'clock, and then the 11 o'clock moves away from it. So you get that 3-hour structure: 9, 11 on top of 10, 10 on top of 9, reset, and then 12, 1, 2, all to the upside, right? So we don't take, I don't really include the 1500 on, like I trade the 1500 to end of day completely separate from this, right? So when you're doing these, you're usually going to use 9, 10, 11, reset, 12, 1, 2 to identify this. So this would be actually categorized as a DMP style day. right? And we can see the whole thing that makes it a DMP is that we don't take out any of the hourly lows until we put the 1500 in. It does, but if you look at the instructions, it'll tell you up here that 5 or more hours cannot take out the high or low towards the 930. So 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour, right to the up, telling us that you're better off buying the dip, buying the dip, buying the dip, buying the dip, right? For the 6 hours that we trade. Okay, and we can see with data, right, that happens 15% of the time out of 4,180 days, right? So the importance of all this, right, is to be able to adjust your mindset into what systems, what trade models should I be turning on? What style of trader should I be which style of trader should I be that day? Should I be holding for 100 handles, extended expected value, or should I be shooting for cash flow targets with lower expected value, right? I think I covered everything, but that's how we tie in the O5 boxes, tie into, the hourly quarters, and the hourly quarters tie into those 3 hour thirds and quarters, but they all tie into the daily classification, right? So hopefully this help opens your eyes to the live price component. Now what we're going to do in the next part of the phase course is we're going to teach you how to use statistical probabilities, right, to be able to identify the high day, low day, and put 3 hour statistics on your charts, 3 hour structure statistics, and figure out the extreme, the high day, low day on your chart, right? So hopefully that helped. Later.
Thanks, Mickey. Awesome, guys. Hopefully, and just along that same lines, hopefully, as you were going through that, you kind of saw your what we'll call fraud days, I guess. So hopefully, that's helped you figure those out, because that one step alone can help save you lots of accounts, lots of wasted time, and all that kind of stuff. So appreciate that, Mickey, and have yourselves a great day.